Now let's go to our first audience question. Why don't you go ahead and tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Casey McCreary, and I'm from New Hanover County.
Thank you, Casey. And what question would you like to pose to the candidates?
I would like to thank all the candidates. I would like to remind us what Colin Powell's wife said today when she said the Messiah greeting is, "How are the children?" And I think that's the most important thing. My question is, given the rate of dropout in high school, as much as 62% for African Americans, 34% for Caucasians, what is it that you have done on the board to ameliorate that, or what do you plan to do if you get in? Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. We'll start with Ms. Huguley.
Okay. Well, I have had the opportunity fairly recently to hear a student, and this was just one example, who dropped out of one of our major high schools. And he said, nobody seemed to care. Nobody seemed to care if I was there. Nobody seemed to care if I was learning. I think now some children are so motivated and comes from homes that are so education oriented that they can just breeze through high school and go. But some children, a lot of children, need to know that somebody cares. And I think one thing that we talk about a lot, which I do, is raising standards. We need to have very high standards. But you have to realize if we put in place very high standards and the child has absolutely no hope of reaching those standards, we have a huge problem. I believe we need a lot of time.
Mr. Rhodes.
To reduce the dropout rate, there has to be early intervention. It has to start with remediation early. Back to the Smart Start question that was posed earlier. That's when we have to start the intervention. And as the child moves through the system, there has to be, as Ms. Hughley said, that child has to connect with someone and understand that someone cares. And once that child understands that someone cares and that school is relevant, we have to offer other alternatives for students. We need to expand our career technical education. It's not the poor student that drops out all the time. There are a lot of our good students drop out. So what we have to do, we have to have that intervention and make sure that school is relevant. Students drop out and leave school in high school, but pretty much they drop out before they get there. So we have to make sure we have that intervention, that someone cares, and that school is made relevant for the students. If they don't see the need for it, they won't attend.
Mr. Stein.
It's a great question. The overall funding for New Hanover County Schools is above state average. We're second per student only to Durham. Yet we rank 83rd out of 115 local education agencies in four-year graduation rate. Looking deeper, the results for our black students, we are actually 97th. And for our economically disadvantaged students, we rank 109th. That's not an acceptable figure. That is a poor figure. How do we start it? I think Nick Rhodes has it right. What we know is that if kids can read at a third grade level, by the time they're in third grade, they will probably graduate. And the way that we focus on getting high school graduation is to put all of our focus on those first 4 years, kindergarten through third grade.
Mr. Thompson.
I would agree. I think what we have to do, as we said before, start with early childhood, not start with kindergarten, start with birth, provide ways to give the structure for later learning come in place. Once a child knows in second or third grade and failing, then we need to be aggressive in our intervention. We have to intervene in a way that cuts through the kids' facade and gets down to where they're at. Being an artist in schools, I often work with children in that way, and I found sometimes you can connect with them in poetry. You can connect with them in ways and find a soft spot. Talk to me about soccer. Tell me about why you love it. You get them to think about it and try to put that into words. And they then have a success. Students have to build on successes, and our dropout students are ones that have not had successes. Consequently, they feel that life has nothing in store for them and they fail.
Ms. Kavanaugh.
We've done things throughout the years, starting from almost 20 years ago when we had the lacrosse team that started out as a dropout prevention tool, and it worked. We've had other different tools that have helped, but we still have a problem with dropouts. This 2 meetings ago, our policy committee, which I'm part of, adopted policies that will allow principals to have the discretion to have leeway in the regulations regarding their students so that it will help prevent dropouts. Also, when we were interviewing for a new superintendent, one of the major things that this board used in trying to determine who we wanted as a superintendent was their track record on student dropouts. And our new superintendent has a really good track record on reversing student dropouts, and we hope that he'll be able to replicate that here.
Mr. Hayes.
It certainly is an area of concern and something the board is aware of, and with Dr. Markham coming on board, I hope we can make more progress than we have made, because it is one of the bad areas that we have as far as what our scores look like in comparison to other areas. But I'd also like to say that the National Dropout Prevention Center developed 15 strategies that the Department of Public Instruction adopted, and then we also adopted those, and there's over 100 policy strategies, et cetera, that this board has adopted, everything starting, and I agree, more emphasis in the earlier grades, but then also with the early colleges, Mosley Performance Learning Center, and there's just quite a bit of stuff in between as far as coaches on the high school level. But the focus that we have been trying to focus in on has been at the elementary level. And if you look at cost per student in some of these areas where you would have higher dropout rates, children in those schools, additional funding in one school that from state and local funds, we might put an extra $2, whereas about $1,500 in high schools per child.
Mr. Hickey.
I was raised in an economically disadvantaged minority household. And what I learned is that hard work, discipline, and family values is the pathway to success. Frankly, I've been frightened by some of the concepts I've heard about edutainment. We have to engage the students. Sure, kids do better when they feel like things are applicable to them. But children make excuses. We all make excuses. Children dislike things which are difficult. They dislike failure. The most sane thing I've heard tonight was from Mr. Stein. The truth is, if a child doesn't know how to read by the 3rd grade, they will continue to repeat the 9th grade right before they drop out. The only thing we can do to decrease our dropout rate is to concentrate on K through 3 education to teach reading. Thanks, Mr. Stein. I wholeheartedly agree.
Mr. Higgins.
Well, I'm in total agreement with that also. Early programs. The issue is with, again, and I keep going back to the Harlem Children's Zone, is the discussion that at age 1, a rich child, poor child really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But then from that point on is when the child who lacks the reading skills, the exposure in the home life starts to fall behind. We've got to try to do something, but we've got to have the funding to be able to reach those 2- and 3-year-olds. We get them in when they're 4 years old, but they're already behind by the time they get there. We've got to have great teachers who have an interest in the education of their children. We have to have career planning at the middle schools. And being at the community college where I teach, I recognize that there are a lot of programs that could reach a lot of these kids who want to drop out, and we've got to create some relationship with the community college.